Hi, I'm Cliff, and this is my garage. My 2007 Hummer H3X has almost 150,000 miles on it, and it's still running on the original spark plugs. I'm kind of thinking maybe it's time I changed them. Hey, welcome back to the garage. And if this is your first time joining me, thanks for dropping by. So as I was saying, my Hummer has almost 150,000 miles on it, and it's developed a bit of a problem recently. It has a kind of a rough idle, and also it sometimes stalls or comes close to stalling when coming to a stop. I used this inexpensive OBD2 code reader to check the engine and found it was reporting an error of random misfires. So that led me to suspect something in the ignition system or something related to it that controlled or affected the ignition system. If you'd like to get one of these for yourself, I'll put a link down in the description below the video. So it could be several things, but I'm going to start off with doing some maintenance items that I really should have done by now and need doing anyway. Today, we're going to do the spark plugs, and it's a pretty simple job, definitely a DIY type of job, and you should be able to do it in probably 15 to 20 minutes. So I've got my tools and supplies all put together here and ready to go. I've got the spark plugs. You'll need 5 of them. The Hummer is an inline 5 engine, 5 cylinders. I've got these little trays here to hold parts and to hold any bolts that come out. These things are super handy. They're magnetic so that they stick to the engine and don't go any, or not stick to the engine. They stick to any metal part and keep things from walking off. Also, if it's a magnetic item like a bolt or a nut that's steel, it'll stick in there and it has less of a chance of falling out. I've got a variety of sockets here. I know that I need an 8mm for the hose here, and I'm pretty sure I need a 10mm to remove the resonator box. And then, of course, got spark plugs. You'll also want to find some dielectric grease. This isn't essential, but it's not a bad idea. Basically, we're going to put it onto the spark plug or actually up inside the coil pack. This prevents corrosion and keeps, if it were a typical spark plug wire with a boot, it would keep the boot from heat welding onto the plug. Now, if you're going to do this, make sure you get a dielectric grease. The dielectric means it won't conduct electricity, and there's no chance of shorting anything out. I'm going to put links for everything that well, not everything. I'll put links for the correct spark plugs, the trays. And this is something you'll need. I'll talk about that in a second. And also the grease. Now, this is something you don't absolutely have to have, but it sure makes your life a lot easier. And it's only like $6 or7. This is a spark plug socket, especially made to use with a spark plug. In the case of the Hummer, you need a 5/8. They come in different sizes because spark plugs come in different sizes. And what it is if you just use a normal socket and then you go to put the spark plug in, well, the spark plug is going to fall out. A spark plug socket has a rubber gasket or washer built into it that grabs onto the spark plug so that it won't fall out. And then when you get the spark plug screwed in and tightened down, it just it comes off with a little bit of effort. So the plan of attack is to start off by removing this air inlet hose. And I think actually it's easier to use a nut driver instead of a socket. This is probably a lot quicker to do that. Then we're going to remove this box here. This is the resonator, the intake resonator, and that will expose the coils, and then we'll remove the coils to get at the spark plug. Now, one important thing is that you will see people who will remove this resonator and replace it with a piece of straight ductwork. They think this is going to improve their performance because they think that this resonator is some kind of a muffler. And of course, as we all know, mufflers rob power. Well, Yes, this acts as a muffler, but it's not designed to be a muffler. And so removing it will not only not get you more horsepower, it will actually cost you horsepower. If you want all the nerdy details and physics behind why this is true, I'll give you a link to that video I did on this up here in the upper corner here somewhere. Also, I've got my DeWalt impact driver on standby in case one of these bolts decides to get stubborn with me. Best impact driver I've ever tried, although I'm about to get my hands on the new Festool impact driver, and I want to compare the two of them head to head. But as it stands right now, this is the best impact driver I've ever used. Super handy, super powerful. Just a great, great tool. There are a pair of captive clamp bands that hold this duct on, and we just loosen those up. And the screw mechanism for the other one is located in the back. Okay, those are now loose. And this gets a little tough to remove. This is very tight. Try going at it from the other direction. There we go. Why this one doesn't want to come off. It's definitely loose. There we go. It's really stubborn. There is a little tab there that fits into this slot thing, but I don't know. I don't know why that was jammed on so tightly, so we'll set this air duct aside. Okay, now we have access to the two bolts, one here and one here, that hold the resonator box on. It's quite a reach back here. It's also a bit of a difficult angle because I'm running into this thing here. This is where I really wish I had a magnetic socket. Help be sure I don't drop that thing. All right, so now we're going to remove, or we're going to loosen another band clamp on the back side here that's holding the rest or the other intake duct. Now, second thought, I think we'll loosen this other one here and take the duct off with the resonator. That looks like it might be considerably easier to do. Now, you do need to be careful because there is a small vacuum hose on the back side. Having trouble getting this hose to turn loose because there's so little room. There we go. And just carefully reach back here, find this hose, and pop it loose. Doesn't want to let go. There we go. You can see this is a little vacuum hose. It sits back in this recess right here, and then it connects on there. That is got a bit of oil on it. Not sure if I should be concerned about that or not. Okay, regardless. Now that the resonator is out of the way, you can see the individual coil packs, one per cylinder. Now, on older cars, of course, we only had a single coil and used a distributor to send the spark out to the individual cylinders in the correct order. Modern cars, we've got one coil per cylinder, and it fires when needed under computer control. Each coil pack is held in place by a single 10mm bolt. pops off, and there it is. That's all there is to it. Now, these coils, of course, are also 150,000 miles old, and they're definitely on the list to be replaced. That's probably what I'll do next, especially if changing the plugs doesn't solve the problem. So just kind of let that coil hang out of the way, switch over to our spark plug wrench, just work it down onto the plug. There we go. It's being stubborn. Different angle on this. There. Keep backing it out until it gets loose and pick it up. And that is one dirty spark plug. Take a new plug, put it into the socket, and just drop it down into the hole and try to feel for it to drop into position. Then turn it backwards a few times. Make sure that you're on straight, and then carefully get it started. A spark plug is one place you really, really do not want to get something cross-threaded. The specs call for 13 foot-pounds of torque, so I've set my torque wrench appropriately, and we just tighten it till it clicks. Not much pressure at all. Now, there's one problem you can run into, is when the socket will not turn loose and it comes off of your extension or ratchet or whatever you're using. In that case, a pair of needle nose pliers comes in real handy. Once we've got the plug properly torqued up, we'll take our dielectric grease, put a little glob inside the coil pack, and reinstall it. This calls for a bit of gymnastics because I didn't want to bother disconnecting connector. Just put it down until it seats and then reinstall the bolt. Use our impact driver to make this job a little quicker. So I've removed the tools and parts from the engine. We're just going to try a quick startup now. I always like to do that for one plug just to make sure that I've got the procedure right and I'm doing it correctly. Okay. Oh, there we go. All right. Not sure what that little bit of funkiness was on the startup where it was dying out for a second and then it smoothed out. I'm thinking that may be related to the fact that we don't have that vacuum hose hooked up. But we did get a smoothish start, and it didn't sound like one cylinder was dropped out entirely, so I think we're good to go to finish up the rest of the cylinders. One thing that's a bit tricky is the number 1 coil right here. The bolt holding it on is kind of tucked up underneath this wiring race that's running across the engine here. Now, I've seen people try and, they try and take this off or take it loose at least. And what happens 99% of the time is they end up breaking some of the mounting tabs. And so they either have to pay to get some more mounts or they have to just let it flop loose. The real way to attack this is something you really should have in your toolbox, and that is a swivel adapter for your socket wrenches. So that we can reach in here, we can get on that bolt at an angle. Okay. And now, should come right out of there. Backing right out. After a certain point, it starts jamming up against that race. And so we got to reach in here and just do it with our fingers. And we'll try and take the entire coil out. There we go, without removing that bolt. And there we go. No broken mounting tabs. One thing I forgot to mention is the spark plug gap. The specs call for the gap between the electrode and this, good Lord, I don't even know what that thing is called. The gap in between these two things is supposed to be between 44 and 50 thousandths of an inch. So I already went through and adjusted the gap on all these plugs before we started today. I just used a feeler gauge and got real sophisticated with a pair of needle nose pliers and a small hammer, and slowly adjusting and tapping until I got about a 46 thousandths gap in there. And that should be good. There are spark plug gapping tools you can buy that help out. They automatically gap to whatever you set it to. I'll see if I can find some of those on Amazon and give you a link to one that I think looks good. Now, when you're putting in this dielectric grease, do be careful. Don't put a big old glob of it in there, because if you put in way too much, you'll actually end up like hydro sealing against the spark plug, and then it airlocks, and you've got all this air trapped up in here. You can't get the thing down on there, or it becomes very hard to put it down on there. So just be careful of that. Don't use a ton of it. Oh, one thing you should note that this tip is flexible. You can bend this around to get them in and out. This one's being a little stubborn, so we're going to use a hammer on it, or the impact wrench. Wow, that was pretty tough. With all the plugs changed and all the coil packs reinstalled, let's try another test start. Hopefully we get a nice smooth idle. Sounds good. There's a little bit of that dropout. Let's see if that goes away again. Okay. And hopefully that won't happen anymore once we get everything buttoned back together. Okay, got everything buttoned back up, but just, work backwards from the order that you took it apart, making sure that you tighten everything up. One thing that's kind of easy to forget is these captive band clamps. Make sure you remember to tighten those back up once you get them in place. They're so tight to start with, it's kind of easy to forget. You got to also screw down those clamps. One other bit of difficulty was the hose that's on the back bottom side of the resonator box. And that's a bit tricky to get on there. I found the way to do that, or the way I found that was easiest for me, was to loosen it, pull it down a little bit out of the groove that it sits in, get it on the fitting, and then push the resonator box down. And that seems to have worked just fine. I started it up great, took it for a little test drive. It seems to be running a bit smoother, especially at idle. Now, the jury's still out on whether or not I've solved the problem with the engine stalling when I come to a stop. That's just going to take some time, because it wasn't doing it every time. It did seem to drop a bit, but again, it didn't stall during my test drive, so I don't know if I fixed it. I don't know why, but it tends to do it to my wife all the time, and so I'll have to let her drive it some and report back to me whether or not it's happening to her again. Now, one thing that can cause that idle problem that I was talking about, where it idles rough or it dies on stopping, is a dirty air filter. So just real quick, let's check the air filter. We just take in, there are 3 little clips here on the filter box. It comes right off, and nope, I just changed this filter a few thousand miles ago, so it looks great. Get that back on. And if you want to know how to change the air filter on a Hummer, that was it. Getting it back together is considerably more of a pain. There. Tough to get the little tabs into the back there. All right. We know that's good. Seems to be running fine. Let's leave it there for today. As always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, liking, and sharing my videos. Now, speaking of liking, please go down there, find that thumbs up button, and give me a like on this video. It really helps with YouTube's algorithm when it sees that people are liking the stuff that I am producing. And speaking of the algorithm, another thing that really helps is to have subscribers to my channel. Go down there, find that big red subscribe button, not this one, but the one down there. Give it a click and subscribe to the channel. And then if you want to keep up with everything that I'm doing on the channel, go down next to the subscribe button. There's a little bell icon. Click on that and it changes to the little ringy things. That means you've turned on notifications. And that means that YouTube will let you know every time that I post new stuff from here in Cliff's Garage. I'll see you next time.